And we are back. It's a new week with a new episode of the podcast. I am your host, as always, Justin Basch, and this is the Baschamania podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure to subscribe to Baschamania. And if you enjoy this episode, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild on you? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
All right. This is technically going to be called, I think, Coffee Time with Alli Ragan. I know she just poured coffee. I just got some coffee. Yeah. How you doing today?
I'm doing really good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this conversation, as I usually am with people who come on here, because I've been following you for a while, both, on social media and your career. And I'm so intrigued because your story is unique. Like, even when I always do a deep dive into people before they come on. And I'm like, okay, wait, she played volleyball, soccer, and she wrestled. And then her dad was her coach. Like, you've got a unique career. So I want to kind of go back to that. Tell me about how you got started in wrestling, aside from apparently just being super athletic, playing every sport there is.
Yeah, I mean, my childhood was just like that. Like, it was like both my parents were coaches. My mom was a college volleyball coach and professor. And then my dad was a high school teacher and wrestling coach. So they were both super busy. And so I think the easiest thing for them to do with me and my brother was just like, send us to this practice and go do this. And so it was like practice to practice to kind of like keep us occupied until they were done with their practices. And so that was pretty much my childhood, just like bebopping around as a kid, just sport to sport. I mean, I had to learn how to play the piano. They put me in so many random different things.
I just started learning the piano a couple of years ago. I love it. It's hard, but I love it.
It is. Yeah, it's definitely something.
You still play it at all?
I definitely still know how to, but I don't have a piano in my house, which once you it's kind of like riding a bicycle, but not as easy as getting back on the bicycle. You definitely lose that more than that. So that was pretty much my childhood. And then wrestling kind of just like fell in my lap since my dad was obviously a coach and my older brother wrestled. And I was just like, just be chill. I never had any intention to really wrestle. I wasn't like, I'm going to go be an Olympic champ, but I was bored on the side of practices, just watching and stuff and swinging on the ropes. And when they would like play like sharks and minnows and those fun games, as pretty much like all youth wrestling is, at the end, they're like, let's just play games. That's when I would be like, yep, I'm in now. So for the longest time, I was just like a game player. And then I also didn't compete for a really long time too, because I don't think my parents really wanted me to like throw me out to the wolves, so that's kind of how it started. And then from there, all throughout high school, like you said, I played volleyball in the fall, wrestling in the winter, and soccer in the spring. And I also played club soccer in the fall too. So I was pretty much like just really busy. So I think wrestling really was only a winter sport to me. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. Like anytime I could outside of the winter, I went to practices, like club practices and stuff. But
now, were you as good in soccer and volleyball?
Yeah, we were good. Not necessarily like we never like won state or anything, but we were like in the state runnings and stuff. So yeah, but soccer was always my favorite sport. I will say that.
Well, and I heard you say, weren't you originally when you were considering college thinking about playing soccer? And there's like you were talented at soccer. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, I'm the best at wrestling, so I'll go wrestle.
Yeah. No, soccer was my love, and I was definitely thinking about playing soccer. But like now that I look back on like the options between soccer, like would I be on the women's national team? No. So you know what I mean. So it's just like crazy how things just like transpire, and then. Yeah, I mean, until as far as like college goes, I was like looking at soccer and wrestling too. And then King College randomly kind of like fell into my lap, and I went on a visit there. I loved Coach Warman, my college coach. And yeah, he had a really good recruiting class. Like our team was stacked in college, like with Sarah Hildebrand,
I saw that yesterday.
Amanda Hindy. Yeah. So yeah, we were good, and that definitely helped that transition as well. So I answered like 5 questions probably.
Well, and it's funny too. No, because what I'm curious about is like a lot of people come on the last like 5 to 10 episodes, I'd say. I've been talking to people about the role their parents played. Like a lot of guys, I think it was like starting with McFadden's episode, and ever since then, they're like, one of the things I want to talk about is how well my parents did, that they didn't put an emphasis on winning and losing. They didn't put all the pressure on me. And your story is even more interesting because you didn't just have parents at home in your corner, literally on the mat, your dad. Like, what was your relationship like, and what was it like having a dad for a coach throughout high school?
Yeah, that was definitely pretty easy, I would say, for me. And it definitely helped that he worked the high school that I was at too. So it was good just to like hop down to his office and be like, hey, I need this or that, you know? So,
can you get me out of detention?
Yeah, I'm like, I got a little bit of trouble. I was late for the 7th time this week. No, it was good. I mean, he was really good at that, like, athlete dad thing. So his rule was like, hey, once we're out of the wrestling room, once we're home, like, boom, back transition to dad. So unless my older brother wrestled as well, like I said, and unless we had like some at home, like we wrestled in the living room like probably every night too. Like he just beat me up my whole upbringing. So definitely like if we had questions at home, he would answer. But other than that, he was really good at that like athlete dad balance. So I imagine him like taking that too seriously. I think he was like, I don't want to lose my kids. I think that's what happens at the time. So that like really scared him.
Yeah.
So he did a really good job at that balance.
And, you know, it's funny too, because you, like you just mentioned, when I was looking into it yesterday, I saw that you were sitting there on, what is this saying? Oh, that's weird. Sorry, I got some kind of weird Zoom notice. I'm not used to recording on Zoom, so if something happens, just pick it back up. So I saw you were on a team with Julie and Sarah. What has that been like, having such a stacked team and now having those teammates on a world level, on a national level? Like, what has that been like?
It's awesome. I mean, now that King has like made themselves like a force, it's just our like legacy now is just something that's just ongoing too. So I think that, I mean, when I signed there, that was only the 2nd year that it was a program. So I signed on this program that was like brand new. You know how many women's college wrestling programs are popping up. So I kind of like took a chance because all these other girls were taking a chance, you know? So then once that happened, I think the reason why we can all look back and be like, wow, we were good is because we just like scrapped day in and day out in that wrestling room. We had this like weird basement wrestling room that was like pretty creepy, dungeony, but like the scraps that went down in that dungeon was like, it was awesome. So, and then, they're like my sisters. We've been, you know, on teams and just growing up together pretty much. So it's awesome to see their careers, and I'm support them to like 1,000%. So I think it's awesome to see it that we're still actually doing this because we're getting old, 27 now. And so it's just like, we're still doing it. Let's go, girls.
I can't remember who I just had on. I think it was Victoria Anthony, but I was talking about this generation, all of you that are in your like mid to late 20s. You really are leading the charge with what it's like to go through this and come out of this. And I'm curious your perspective on what it's like to be a part of that kind of initial charge.
I mean, for me, it was pretty easy. My first junior world team, I had those girls, Victoria, Adeline, Helen. These great girls. They're a year older than me, a year or two, something like that. And it was easy for me to look up to them. And I was like, hey, they've gone through this. They've done this before. Victoria Anthony, I think Adeline and Helen, they had all won junior worlds the year before. So I was like, these girls got it. If I do what they do, then I'll be successful, you know? So it was really easy for me up to them. And as a young girl, it was hard. That was definitely a hard thing because really I think that we got all put into this box where it was like women's wrestlers, it's a man's sport. They have to be manly, blah, blah, blah. And I think that we like broke those barriers down, obviously.
Totally.
Those girls I just mentioned, they're beautiful and they're awesome. And obviously social media helps because any young wrestler can go and look at them on their social media or anything and be like, hey, I want to be like Adeline. She's strong, she's beautiful, and she is a 5-time world champ and she beats mass. So I think that's just something that definitely helps the social media age. And I mean, I think that as long as we're showing those girls all these different kind of personalities, whether you want to be strong and beautiful, you want to be goofy and beautiful like Minta, or just like, there's so many different personalities on our national team and things that the girls have options to look up to. So I think that all across our national team, you can find someone as a young girl and be like, hey, I want to be like her.
Right.
And I think that definitely helps our sport growing, and it's easy.
Do you think about that? Like when you're posting on social media and when you're building your personal brand, are you thinking about, for a lot of people, it's not only wrestling is unique because everybody's trying to always grow the sport, but you have a unique opportunity to where you can not only work on growing your personal brand, you can help be a pioneer. And like you said, talking about King University, women's programs are popping up everywhere. And you guys are at the front lines leading the charge. Do you think about that, like when you're on social media, what you're posting on social media? Do you give like place to all that?
Not as like I go through phases of social media. I feel like sometimes I'm like, let me post this.
We all
and
do.
That. Yeah. And so lately I've just been like off of it. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, should I post that? But I'm a goofy person, me and my roommate and stuff. We just like do stupid things just to like make each other laugh. So sometimes we'll post that and just like, and we've gotten so many comments being like, we live for your Instagram posts. And so we just like be on there a lot of times. But so yeah, it just really depends. I feel like I don't necessarily like, is the future women's wrestler generation gonna, like this? I just think that as long as I'm myself and I stay true to who I am, then that's enough in itself, Yeah. If that makes sense.
And it's funny because my wife's becoming more and more of a wrestling fan since I'm such a diehard.
For her, yeah.
So I was telling her you were coming on, and within like 30 seconds, the conversation went to your cat's Instagram. Within like 30
He's
seconds.
right here, yeah.
and I told her, because she wants another cat soon. I was like, look, if we get a cat like this, I'm down with it.
Yes. Sushi's the best, man.
Yeah, I was cracking up over that. So going back to the wrestling side of things. Now, in high school, you wrestled guys too, right? And then it wasn't until college it was only girls. Yep. What was that like, transitioning from high school where you wrestled boys and girls, and then it was just girls in college?
Yeah, I mean, high school was hard, especially like I started as a super lightweight, like this, what was it? I think it was 103 or something like that. Yep. And then as I kept getting bigger and bigger, things just got like harder. So it's hard for women in that male dominant sport to wrestle. It's one thing to wrestle them at 103, but it's another thing to wrestle them at 130. So, just like that transition of being a girl wrestling a man pretty much. And then you almost have to, like, I've heard so many stories being like, I had to keep cutting weight to be like, to even make my lineup or this and that, or to be successful wrestling the guys. And that sucks, Yeah. I can't even imagine that struggle. But for me, I was definitely more successful as a lighter weight. And so it's just, but for me, I just don't necessarily look at that like the outcome. Like I have to win states to be successful as a wrestler. I loved wrestling, and I still to this day love wrestling. Like that's what my passion is. I love learning. I love competing. Everything about it is something that I love. So I think even as a high schooler, I was just like, hey, just go out there, give it your all, and no one can fault you for that. So I think that that's where I came from with that. But man, my first state bracket in boys was like me, Tony Ramos, Ellis Coleman, one of the Dardanes brothers. There was just like
Illinois is tough.
Yeah, it was. I think Ramos posted the state bracket like a couple years back. I was like, oh, no wonder I didn't place.
And then where did you train after college?
I moved straight to the OTC. So
okay.
I think that was like an easy transition. I feel like women's wrestling colleges, there's not that like RTC thing, So that was the next step. And I had a great relationship with Coach Steiner. I still do. He's a great, great guy. So I think that I learned so much from him, and it was a great time there.
And training there, you end up having back-to-back silver medal finishes at the World Championships in 2016 and 2017. And I want to talk about those for a few minutes because it's funny. On one hand, like there's so much to be proud of a silver medal. So I hate like talking about it in a negative way where it's like, I'm curious because I know how hard it is and what a goal it is to become a world champion. So I know that a silver medal to me I'd give a kidney for that, right? But to somebody who's training that and has the actual capability and skill to do it, what was it like falling short in those years? Like, what was your perspective after 16 and 17?
For me, it was interesting. Like after I lost in the finals of trials in 2016, I really didn't know if I was going to keep wrestling in general. So it was, because that's just heartbreaking, you know.
Sure.
So close to something and that's your lifelong dream, blah, blah, blah. But I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And so getting back on that horse to even wrestle in Worlds in 2016 later that year was something that I was just like proud of myself for that. And I was like, hey, I didn't think like a couple months ago that I was going to keep wrestling until Steiner had like a conversation. He's like, are we going to do this? Let's get back on it, you know? So definitely going into that competition, I was like, look, I didn't think I would be here wrestling still. And here I am, just go give it your all and go like find that love. I think that I kind of lost that along the way. 2015, 16, I was just like in like the lull of things. I'm like, another practice, another this, another that. So I think finding that like passion really like lit that fire for me. And I was like, let's go, let's do this. And so for me, I like to take things like it's too overwhelming to be like, I'm another quad, I'm going to get back first 2020 after 2016. But it was like, hey, here's your next, and this is the next most important competition. Let's get ready for it. And so I think in 2016, that was what I found. And I mean, falling short of winning a world championship, that's really hard. But looking back a couple months before, I was like, wow, I didn't even think I'd be wrestling, you know?
Right.
So, and then 2017, that one hurt definitely a lot more because that passion was definitely lit. And so falling short in that championship was definitely really hard on me. But it was just like next best thing, like what can I keep training for? So just learning from that and taking that forward. And I mean, second sucks, but
and that's why I say like I don't even mean it in a negative way because it's such an accomplishment. But on one hand, I think there's things that other people listening can take away from. I think that what I've learned from doing this podcast is somebody like yourself who's uber successful and extremely decorated, they don't like get hung up on some of these losses. They learn from them really, really well, and they maintain a proper perspective. And I think that people who don't maintain the proper perspective are the ones who really hurt. And I'm curious, what was your perspective like right after? Did you have to work hard to try to regain that focus of like, hey, that sucks, but what can I get better on? Like, what was that process like?
No, I mean, I hate losing. I'm like such a competitive person to my core, but I think that obviously most of us wrestlers are, but I think that I like to give myself like maximum like 24 hours. It's like, hey, be sad, feel that. And then, hey, you got to move on. Like the sun still comes up the next day. There's still more work to be done. You can still learn, like take that, write down exactly what happened and move forward with it. And there's only up from here. You know what I mean? I think that that's something that I personally do. It's like, hey, win 2018 Worlds, you know, what's the next best thing that you could do? So for me, I like fall in love with that learning process and I'm like, hey, learn from that, move on. And so something like that is just what helps get me through that.
And then it was just after the 2017 World Championships, you went to Iowa, right?
Yep.
What led to that?
At the time I dated Corey Clark I'd been dating him for a really long time. And it was kind of the next thing that I was like, I can't live at this training center. I lived in an apartment in a dorm forever.
Yeah.
I would visit there a lot and go back and forth from OTC and Iowa. And there's no way you can't love that room and that intensity. I was just like, this is what I need. This is the next thing that I need to be the best wrestler. And I mean, before that, really, before I moved there, I didn't really learn how to like hand fight. I was more of like an outside wrestler.
Sure.
And I have learned so much from being in that Iowa room. And I wouldn't trade my years there for anything. And so I think that was just the next thing for my career and what I needed to get out of my wrestling. So,
by the way, and I don't know if you listened to Matt McDonough on this podcast last week, but he told me a story of when brands made everybody run with water in their mouths. Did you ever do that?
Never have, but I've heard the story. I can't even imagine. I'm a mouth breather because I have
So
broke my
am I.
nose. Yeah, I have a deviated septum, so I can't breathe out of my nose. I would have been struggling.
Yeah, and that's. I thought of that, and it was like I told me you're going to come back on this podcast and tell like 30 more stories of just brands training stories and everything else. But yeah, I mean, being in the in the Hawkeye room had to be amazing. What do you think was like your biggest takeaway?
Just the amount that you can like. I think that there's so much more that you can get out of yourself. I think Tom and Terry call it the X factor. What's your edge? The thing that you're doing that in your head you can get you have that edge on everyone else. So for me, my edge might be, for example, like, hey, I'm running a stair lap in Carver once a week. Hey, that's my edge. If that mentally is what like makes me that much better than the rest of my competition, then yes, let's do it. That's exactly what I needed at the time. And then also I think that, I mean, Terry Brands will say like one motivational speech before practice. It doesn't even have to be that long, but you're like ready to go. You're firing on all cylinders and you're like, let's go. Let's get the most of myself practice. And something that he also said that resonated with me was like, you need to be, once you come on the mat and like you're ready for a competition, you need to be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all together and working at the same time to be your best self out there. So I think that also just on the mat, there's way more to it than that. So it's just like, hey, you got to be your best self in every asset of life to be able to go win an Olympic, to go be able to win NCAA for those guys. And then also something that I got out of it a lot too was just like your goals. I think that he talks a lot about process goals and outcome goals. And I don't think people like differ from like they're a young person listening. They're like, I want to go win states this year. And that might be a lofty goal to some people. For me, it's like, hey, I want to go win the Olympic gold. That's a very lofty goal. But hey, if I'm thinking about that every single day, that's very overwhelming for me personally. Yep. So if I'm thinking about a process in that little bit, I'm like, hey, today I'm going to really try and get better at sweep single. Today I'm really going to try and perfect this setup. I'm going to go take down to turn, little things like that just make it easier, because that goal can be very overwhelming, at least to me. So I think those are the main things
and then it's funny because you have this theme of overcoming adversity and mental toughness, and if my memory is correct, you won the Wrestle-Off to make the world team in 2018 and then had to pull out because of a neck injury, right?
Yeah.
And then hard. I was reading an article that you said you were literally at one point crying and begging the doctors to let you wrestle. How did you deal with that? Like, how did you not just throw the towel in and say, man, this sucks? Like, how did you move forward?
It was hard because at that time I was in the worst pain of my life. So, and it was probably, what was it? It was our last camp before we left for Worlds at the OTC. So it was probably like 3 weeks out from Worlds. And I like could not move. Like both my arms were dead. Anytime I like move my neck like that much, excruciating pain.
Was it after something specific in practice? Was it like?
Yeah, it was like, it was after something specific. I don't exactly know exactly what happened, but it was after like a front headlock practice where like you're doing a lot of defense and stuff, and I was like, yo, something's not right. So yeah, after that, I mean, once that happened, I was like in my mind going through that, I'm like, I compete in 3 weeks, like how the heck? I'm like, I better get a lot of adrenaline pumping through this body or else I'm gonna lose first round like so bad, And so yeah, once I actually finally got like, something's not right, because they would try needling, cupping, just everything to get me ready to go for Worlds. And they're fine, we need to get you an MRI app. So I think that those results came in. I was just like distraught. And then, I was like crying doctor at the OTC. I'm like, please, I was like, I'll wear one of those weird neck braces, like anything that I have to do to go compete at Worlds in 3 weeks, like I will do it. Like, you don't understand. And he's like, Alli, no, like you don't understand. Like anything goes wrong, you could be paralyzed. And then so once I like stepped back from that, I'm like, you're like, how the heck would I have competed? Because I was in so much pain. So yeah, I mean, and then getting surgery, obviously, it was a no-brainer, and just moving forward from that. And so I feel like I'm pretty level-headed where it's just like, hey, you need to get back on that mat because you love to do and your career's not over. So get that surgery. Let's get this process moving from there. So,
yep. And then you know, most recently you have a Wrestle-Off with Helen Maroulis for 2020, now 2021 Olympics, I guess, but going to the Pan Am team for 2020. What did you take away from that match?
It was, I mean, usually we're like pretty both scoring people in our match, like both very offensive. So the fact that our match was 2-2 is like pretty weird, you know? Yeah. So it was just, it was really close match, kind of tactical, a little too tactical on my end for sure. Yeah. And definitely just like letting it fly. It's like the worst thing that I'll always say coming off the mat being like, who was that out there? You know, like that's not you. I'm sure every wrestler listening to this podcast is like, they've had that same thing being like, that was not me out there. But definitely just like letting it fly more. And hey, just no one wants to see two great wrestlers having a 2-2 match. Is boring. Give the people what they want. Let's get some energy going. Let's get it. You know, so I think that just like letting it fly and just like just open more and being like staying true to who I am. So.
And do you think now that you know, it's funny because you were going to have to wrestle her potentially again in a potential Olympic team final match. Do you think having those couple of matches before helped get you ready for the Olympic trials? And do you think that this whole quarantine with now you basically have an extra year? Now, some people think that's a huge positive. Some aren't. I think the younger somebody is, the probably more beneficial they think it is. How do you view all this extra time you have now to kind of prepare yourself for that?
I mean, I stay pretty positive about most things, so I think it's nothing but positives. I would obviously want to wrestle someone before big dance, you know. Yeah. So why not keep like getting more of a feel? That's what I call it. I would like to feel someone. Yep. So yeah, that's what I would take away from that. And then as far as, I mean, you can only get so much better in a year. Like just think about how good I've gotten from this point to this point. And I think that any person can, if they have the right level headed on their mind, they're only taking this as a positive. So I think it's nothing but positives. And so yeah, just going forward, you have so much more time to get better. And I think that's like so cool.
And did you wrestle in 2012 Olympic trials?
I did, yes.
Because I was thinking about that, and I'm like, there's not many people. I think on the men's side, it's only Burroughs. I don't think anybody else wrestled in this. There's not that many wrestlers that this will be their third Olympic trials.
Yeah, I'm like, I think I was a freshman in college in 2012. Yeah, and I qualified for trials.
Yeah. I'm wondering if anybody. I'll have to look into that. But how do you think that helps your experience going into your third Olympic trials?
I mean, the more comfortable you can get out on the mat, the better it is, I think. So as long as you, like Perry always says, when the lights shine bright, you better come out and wrestle. You know what I mean? Like that's the best wrestlers. So as long as that's what you're comfortable with and that's what you practice and you can visualize it and just really see that, then it's going to be nothing but positives for me. So I've been there, you know, and I've been in the finals and I've lost, and just taking everything and learning from it, it's only like forward and up from here. So.
And do you hold on? I like it. How much of that do you hold on to? Like, I know a lot of people have told me that they kind of split it. They let go of saying, hey, I'm going to let go of the negative. I lost. I'm letting go of that. But they hang on to the positives of that hunger. Like that loss provides the more hunger. Is that true for you too? You kind of let go of the actual loss aspect of it, but it helps build your hunger to make that team?
100%. I mean, there's only, you can only hold on to the loss so much before it like eats you up. I've seen people like just be dark holes for a while after losses. And I'm like, hey, I can't imagine like you want to like lift them up and be like, hey, we got to keep going forward, you know?
Right.
And so for me, I think that's something that maybe that's programmed into me from my parents, but I've just always like, hey, let's keep it going, you know? So I think that as long as you're taking that loss, there's no way you can take a loss positively, but you have to like switch it in your mind. That's like, hey, tweak it here, and from there on, like we're at full blast ahead. So I think that as long as you do that and like can kind of like wire that in your head, then it's only going to be good things from there.
And you mentioned Mark Purdy too, and I'm curious, what is your relationship? What has it been like? I know it's funny. I forgot who I was just telling this to, but I was saying with all this Hawkeye Wrestling Club news and some of it almost being drama, I think it really is another indicator of how much women's wrestling is growing, that it's now becoming like front page news, right? Like you didn't have this like 2, 3, 4 years ago. And some of it's obviously a little bit of drama, of course, but I do think it's cool. And before we kind of talk about Hawkeye Wrestling Club a little bit more in the future, what has your relationship with Mark Purdy been like?
He's awesome. I mean, that man, he knows how to coach individuals. So like I'm very different and I take way different from Forrest. She takes way different than Gilman, so I think that that's something that I'm sure going back, Mark took different than Jesse Delgado, Illinois, so I think that he is so good at coaching each individual and getting them ready exactly in their way. So since I'm older, it's really hard for me to be like, okay, Alli, he's just like, you can't be on the mat every day, twice a day, like you would like we're going to have to find this, and figure it out and be like, hey, you can only be on the mat here, and go, run with that. And he makes me feel confident about exactly what I'm doing. So him being able to coach every different kind of individual is something that's very rare in a coach, I think, and something that's very special about him. So
yeah, he was a blast when I had him on here, and every single person that I asked, everybody, even Quentin Wright was just on. He was telling me about, listen, Mark Purdy was the lone reason I won the Big Ten as a freshman. And I'm curious. So Kayla Miracle has now announced she's going. What are your plans as far as giving this more thought and how this plays out? Have you done anything further since all this news came out?
I mean, I'm 1,000% going to Arizona State with Perry. And yeah, since all that drama, obviously people, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. I just feel like I was came at from all sides, and I'm like, all I did was say what happened to me. It's not that big of a deal. Why are you so mad at me for? So I just think I mean, if it brought news to, like you said, the way you said it, made it more positive. Hey, women's wrestling is actually getting some clout, even though it's it sucked for me. I'm it is what it is. But now that that's all said and done, but yeah, I'm following Perry to Arizona State, and I'm really excited about it. And I obviously have nothing but respect, and I love my time here at Iowa, and it was a blast. It's exactly what I need, and I learned so much from the Brands brothers. And my teammates, I've learned so much from Gilman. Just being around him is amazing, and seeing the way he ticks is just inspiring in itself. So just people like that, and the things that I learned from this program, and I can just take it forward. But I'm excited for the future.
Speaking of Gilman real quick, I am so excited selfishly he's going to Penn State, because I'm in upstate New York, and Cal's a good friend of mine, and I've become almost in my mind, I feel like an honorary Penn State alum. And the fact that he's 3 hours away, I was just texting with him yesterday. I'm like, dude, I can't wait till you get to Penn State so I can drive down, just so we can have coffee and stuff.
Yeah.
He's definitely someone I want to spend more time around. But, what are you looking forward to the most about heading out to Arizona?
The weather. No, I'm just kidding. I love.
I mean, hey, the shoe fits.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I'm from Illinois, small town Illinois, so I was pretty much the same in that regards. And I love the seasons and stuff. But at the same time, I'm if I don't have to deal with these crazy winters, then what? I'll take it. Yeah. But no, I just think that for me, like I said, I love learning from everyone, and I learned so much from the Brands brothers, and got a lot out of them. And now moving forward, I'm very excited to learn from Zeke Jones, Lee Pritz, Frank Molinaro, and keep learning from Perry. And I think that just learn from so many different people can only better your wrestling. So I think that Gilman, he's going to learn so much going to Penn State. It's totally different than Iowa,
Yeah.
Their philosophies, everything. And I think if anything, that's going to help him. So I think that it would be crazy as a wrestler for me to be stagnant in one place. And I think that there's just so much we can learn, and everything's just so evolving that why wouldn't I take that and run with it,
Did your move to Arizona make you think about, I know that you almost didn't want to wrestle after 2016. And as soon as a wrestler gets into their late 20s, they start thinking about a transition out of wrestling, or out of competition, I should say. Have you given much thought in in regards to like saying, hey, I'm going to move to Arizona. Like I'm going to sell my place, get a new place and a long-term plan. Do you know if you want to wrestle through 2024 or what you want to do post-competition yet?
I always said after 2020, 4 years is like a long time to commit. And I was like, hey, I'll probably be like 31 by 2024. But yeah, like hopefully I can still walk by then. I'm kidding. But I always said that after 2020, I would take it year by year. Like I had surgery and came back. Like I think it's easier. And I think the way our like, what's it called? Like recovery is evolving too, makes it easier for a person to last longer in the sport. So I always said I would take it year by year after 2020 and shoot, hopefully I make it to 2024. That would be freaking awesome. Or if times lead me somewhere else or say I do get injured, something like that happens, like then so be it. But I think that why not wrestle like year by year and take that and run with it.
And going back to the notion that you're part of that group that is pioneering women's wrestling, there isn't as many opportunities right now for women when they come out of competition like there are men, where there's so many D1 programs and so many different high level jobs where you can go be a Big Ten D1 coach and make really good money. Have you given much thought to that post-competition side of your career and what you want to do?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be an athletic director personally. So I think that because I love sports in general, obviously. And so I think that
you don't come from a sports family at all. So it makes no sense.
So it just makes so much sense. But I mean, if wrestling and women's wrestling's in D1, I would love that too. So I think that transition of me maybe coming off of wrestling, being a coach and becoming like assistant athletic director, and then, that transition, I think that would be something that I see in my future and I would love to be a coach as well out of wrestling. And I love just giving back to the sport. And I think that, the options with women's wrestling right now is like unlimited. Hopefully, I think that hopefully women's wrestling in D1 does go through and gets that emerging sport status. So I think that it was supposed to be in April, the NCAA like vote for it, but with Corona and all that stuff, I think it got pushed back. So hopefully that still can go through and that can happen. But yeah, that's what I see in my future at least.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think there's going to be so many opportunities, and somebody like yourself with the skill set you have, even if it's not tomorrow, even if it's in 5 years, let's say, when all of a sudden those opportunities arise, your credentials aren't changing. So even if you become an AD, you can always say, oh, wait, this is now an option. Like I could go there. It's so unique. It hasn't been done before.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's very exciting.
So last thing here before I let you go, a lot of people like start off a podcast or any kind of interview with quarantine, but I kind of like putting it at the end, right? Like, so moving forward here, quarantine's hopefully winding down. How have you been doing with that? And do you have any plans right now as far as how you're moving out there, all these other things that are happening?
Yeah, I think that the move has obviously like really helped my quarantine transition. So it's like, hey, you have so much time, like you better start packing and like slowly. So instead of like, have you ever packed and been like, I got to move at this date and this date, and you're just like so rushed, you just throw things in boxes. I think that now that I've had time in quarantine to like slowly get my stuff together, get rid of a bunch of stuff. You know how much stuff I've collected over the years that I'm like,
we keep putting crap on eBay, right?
Exactly. Like, yeah, it's crazy. So just that whole process and just like taking time to slow things down. I feel like we're all in like this rush of our day-to-day lives, and it's like, hey, go bake. I've been one of those people like quarantine. It's like, go bake some cookies or, this and that. And just, I've become a better cook. I've cooked so much, and just like little things that I've like put my mind to, like, hey, read this book, listen, just little things that it's like, hey, slow down and take the time to really like be mindful about your everyday things that you're doing, because you have time and that's something that you don't always have. So that's what I've personally got out of this.
And have you been doing things to try to improve your mentality, knowledge, like reading books and doing all that? Like, have you been focusing? I've heard from a couple of people that were telling me like they haven't had this much time to just focus on the mental side of the sport. Like there's the mentality of wrestling, competing, and when you're actually doing things, like you mentioned your X factor of saying, I'm going to run the steps one extra time, I'm going to do this or that. Have you been able to use this time to kind of sharpen your mind even more?
Definitely. I mean, right now why wouldn't you be like journaling every day and just things like that, watching film, just like listening to podcasts, people like that you have on your show, or Wrestling Changed My Life, all those things. I'm like, you can learn from so many people right now. And it's just like, read a book, be inspired. So I think that people, I just see it on, they're like, what am I going to do today? Watch Netflix, and it's just like, hey, get outside, go get some vitamin D, go mow your lawn, go for a walk, like enjoy nature and things like that. So I think that like having that perspective is, I think you can get better from anything. So I think that just having that and being like, just being a little bit motivated still too in quarantine definitely helps.
100%. There's so many people who are just falling victim to, I don't even know what day it is. Thank God I'm hardwired from running a company for 12 years. Every day I'm like, there's got to be something we can do today.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I'm sure many people listening enjoyed it, and I know I sure did. So thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. We'll talk soon. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you did enjoy this episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more episodes. For more wrestling content, be sure to follow Baschamania on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And follow me. I'm at JBash on Instagram and at JustinJBash on Twitter. I'll be back with another episode shortly. See ya.
And the beat goes on, goes on, goes on, goes on.